Directors. Thank you. As I said, Ann Lindsay is president of Life Plan Humboldt Board of Directors, and before returning to Life Plan Community Design, she had a family practice in Arcata for 28 years and served as Humboldt County Health Officer for 18 years. She was a pandemic here, lucky girl. So M is dedicated to innovation and research, and prior to moving to the West Coast, she spent 12 years as an adjunct professor at Boston Architectural College. She's a graduate of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Masters of Architecture, BS in Architectural Design. She is passionate about her work to advance the best design for the older adults with solutions that promote the unique qualities of each community. Life Plan Humboldt is a nonprofit formed to build and operate a life plan community in which older adults can enjoy a maintenance-free lifestyle enhanced by social connections, intellectual stimulation, and activities. It's all yours. Thank you.
I want to start with, just want to tell you, I used my OLLI student card a few years back and got in a student prize at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So it's not just local businesses that honor your student card. I have a couple of announcements about Life Plan Humboldt, and we are having a volunteer training July 16th from 2 to 4 p.m. And those of you who've trained as ambassadors before are welcome to come to get a brush up. And you can, if you email me at ann@lifeplanhumboldt.org, I'll give you the details. We're making progress. There's an environmental impact report in process. We have hired geotechnical and consultants and civil engineers, and they're working. We have a welcome center that we're working on opening up right there next to the property. And we did, as you may have seen, we got a loan. We're getting short-term loans from the Humboldt Area Foundation, Headwaters, Arcata Economic Development, and REDEC to help us with the pre-finance expenses. So that's great. If you haven't completed the move-in survey yet on our website, please do it. It's a way for you to register your design preferences. And so far, people are interested in casual outdoor recreation, walkways, bike paths, studio space, libraries on-site, and on-site assisted living and memory care. And we're trying to accommodate everybody. Another announcement is sometime probably this fall, you'll get an email if you're on our get our newsletter, which I hope you do. You can go to lifeplanhumboldt.org and sign up for updates. But you will get an invitation from us to complete a survey from a company called Promatura. And they're a research firm, and they will survey potential residents about home types, size, and pricing. So please participate. Anyway, I want to say just a word about Perkins Eastman. The Life Plan Humboldt Board and a number of future residents selected Perkins Eastman over several architectural candidates. And just because they listen and they're willing to learn from us how to design a community with a unique Humboldt character. So, and I just want to say one more thing. One of our volunteers described what we're representing really eloquently. She said, Life Plan Humboldt represents more than just a place to live. It symbolizes a commitment to aging with grace, dignity, and a purpose. And so thank you, Shauna McKenna, for that. And now I'm going to let Soo Im take it over. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Hi, everyone. So I'm with Perkins Eastman and the architect on the project, and it's been really great working with the Life Plan Humboldt group. And we've been, we've been associated with Life Plan Humboldt for a few years now. We looked at another site before, but this time we're getting a little bit more serious about actually pushing this forward and making it a real project. So I'm gonna just give me 1 second. Can I share my screen? Sorry about that, lost my place. There we go, and I'm gonna share. Can everyone see my screen okay? Yeah, perfect.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Um, so so this is actually the view of the current site on the and it's just a plain right now, but we're going to change that pretty quickly. And just a little bit about Perkins Eastman. So we've been working with senior living kind of as a typology for over 35 years. And I think we're one of the first architecture firms in the country to develop what this is. And what gets us excited about about these projects is that not two projects are alike, and our clients come to us for more innovative ideas to rethink what does that mean to age gracefully, as Anne mentioned earlier. And this particular community and the group is definitely giving us a lot to think about. And we're excited to kind of envision what this might be like at the end and how it might be different. These are some numbers and all the different projects that we worked on and different clients. And what we do a lot is a little bit different than other communities, is that we do spend a lot of time on research and also going back to our projects to learn from them. And so we have been doing a lot of different studies, and then these are some examples of the publications we do. And there's actually a link down here. It says perkinseastman.com white papers. If you guys are interested, these are all available for download for you to think on to read. The Clean Slate Project is something that we put together a few years ago before the pandemic to talk about what are some of the disruptors that are out in the world, including some resiliency issues. We didn't include a pandemic into that, which we should have, in terms of how we might think about the way we live differently. Missing Main Street is specific about creating village set in around the notion of dementia. And again, like we have these quarterly publications that go out in as a Connect series. So if you guys are interested in any of these, happy to share. And this is a book that I'm going to send you. 2023-24 has been an interesting year to kind of talk about what are the different topics that folks are thinking about as you're thinking about next phase of your life and where you might want to live. And these are some list of things that's coming up. And this notion of authentic experience, I think that's really coming high on the list. So what that means is that, it's not everyone wants to live in a very, hotel-like environment that, I think for last couple of decades, we've been seeing a lot of rise in communities that are hospitality oriented. So it feels like you're on vacation, you're at a resort, but a lot of our residents tell us that's not how we want to live every day. So how do you create this authentic experience? So it's not trying to be just a resorty hotel and every day, but it does become authentic. And then what that means also is that how you run the programs internally within the communities, and how much voice do you have in contributing, and how you want to live on a daily basis. And I think these are the factors that makes each community very unique. And our job as architects is to make sure that you have the infrastructure and the physical space to allow that to happen. So how this starts to feed into the design is some of the notions of flexibility, the resiliency. And of course, when we start to talk about resiliency, we can talk about the weather conditions and the heat wave that we're going through right now, particularly even in San Francisco, it's really warm today. But it's also resiliency in terms of your community and how your living spaces might change and the programs you might adopt to as with different generations of residents coming in. What does that mean to age at home? And the one that's coming up a lot is, the notions of diversity. Our communities are becoming a lot more diverse in terms of, and we're talking more than just gender and ethnic backgrounds, but also age. Often we're accommodating multiple generations of folks in one community. So what does that mean in terms of diversity? And inspired workforce for our staff, and creating a tailored experience for each other. So these are some of the high level pieces that we've been talking about, which is very different. And before that, it used to be about dining experiences and things like that more. So I think the wellness continues to be high on the list, but it becomes more holistic. So again, physical wellness is important, but how do we also nurture cultural wellness and your emotional wellness and all the other aspects of it? And events like this to make sure that you're continuing to learn and providing opportunities like this. Some of the things that we learned during the pandemic is notions of access and traffic control, and how do we do that better? And this is also related to security in some of the areas. I don't think in Humboldt we really worry too much about security as much as we do in some of the inner city communities, but I think those are all related. And in terms of zoning, being able to design the spaces so we don't have really large spaces that houses hundreds of people in one area. I think that's really important. Some of the skilled nursing facilities that got hit pretty hard during the pandemic, and this is something that we do see often even with different flu seasons and things like that. So when you have a large community that really does congregate together as a whole and doesn't have the means to separate into smaller areas, tend to be more difficult. So we learned a lot more about zoning and some of the small house models. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term, but these are the households that are, somewhere between 12 to 15, sometimes as many as 20. And those communities fared a lot better because they had spaces they can separate for smaller groups. And the other piece that's really big is outdoor living, so some of us don't have a backyard, like doing an apartment living like me. And so it was really hard learn lesson. How do we live without being outdoors often? So that's a big element that we're learning over and over again to incorporate into our spaces. And then wayfinding, as you did, how do you put in different signage or visual cues? So as you're changing maybe the way you occupy different spaces and that traffic pattern, how do you make sure that everyone's staying updated with that wayfinding notion and making it easy and obvious? So those are some of the kind of lessons that we learned that we're trying to incorporate into the project. There's in the Life Plan communities, there's several layers of users, and one, primarily is the residents, but also the guests and family. And then we have to worry about the staff, what are their spaces so they can to be at their optimum to make sure that they're taking care of the residents and the service side of it. So these are the 4 layers of users that we design with. So as we're talking about access and traffic control, these are also, we're talking about what is that experience? So what does that entry experience look like for different individual groups? So, and they're different, they're unique, and we want to make sure they're optimum for each one of them. We talked a little bit about outdoor engagement, and I should have said something a little bit earlier. It's like at any given time, if you have any questions, you can think, is there a hand up? You know, feel free to just speak up and ask, and we can pause and take questions. So one of the things, going back to the outdoor engagement, this is an example of a project that's up in Seattle, which is not unlike a similar climate as Pacific Northwest as Humboldt. And we picked this project to kind of take a look at because it's similar in scale for one of our main independent living projects. But here you can see kind of different levels of outdoor living that we can start to talk about. So for instance, there's we start with the private spaces, balconies off of your apartment maybe, but maybe it's not a physical space you occupy, but it's also the views that you take on of the nature. And does that happen at different levels? And then is there an area that I can walk around my area that's safe and secure, but also maybe there's an outdoor dining element, so it's part of the amenity spaces. We talked a lot about, are there different outdoor rooftop gathering spaces that are both for smaller groups and larger groups, and are there maybe gardening opportunities? And of course there's the kind of the greater nature, and how do we access that through different transportations and that proximity with the community. And then again, when we start to talk about these, one aspect of it is physically being able to occupy it and thinking about how these spaces could be flexible. So for instance, this portico here is like during the day, it could be a living room with a fireplace, provide some shaded area with the open space. But at nighttime, that can actually be lit you can actually, we're actually planning this is a different project, but we're planning a screen here so you can do nighttime movie showings and things like that. And then this is also, if you have events, you can set up stage so you can be a little bit elevated for concerts and different events and things like that. Like space up here is kind of similar area that's covered, and then this is near a barbecue pit. So again, providing that opportunity for indoor outdoor living, and shading is really important so that we keep our residents kind of well shaded. I don't think it's as important in Humboldt, but in a lot of cases in the middle of the summer, I think it is important that we want to make sure that on like today, East Bay, we're on a heat wave warning here. Those are the days we want to make sure that we're providing adequate shades. And again, if it's not a direct access, how do we do larger views and making sure like I think the gardening too, and then this kind of relates to accessibility also, but can we do raised bed planters so it's easy to access for everyone? And then that, kind of nice segue into barrier-free design. And as we talk about this, when you look at that photo on the right, what do you think is challenge? What do you think of it? And are there any challenges with that particular image? And you want to take a guess? So it looks lovely, but the surface is uneven. So when you have pavings like that, and then you're relying on canes and walkers, it's a little bit more difficult to travel. Actually, if you're on a wheelchair or on a scooter, it's less of a concern, but those folks who are on walkers, I think that's where we are a little bit worried about. And then if you have residents that tend to shuffle, that could also kind of create some challenges. So making sure that the surfaces are even, and then making sure that these, if you're gonna have pavers like this, make sure that they're well taken care of, so the grass doesn't get overgrown between the pavers and things like that. So these are kind of things that we want to talk about outdoors. Incline's okay to a certain extent, but we want to try to avoid stairs if we can, or really steep ramps, and level changes, and particularly level changes with a threshold where you have, again, there's a change in elevation. I think those are tough. So we want to make sure that there's those are limited. And then when we start to get into indoors, even things like the hardware, like the doorknobs, do you guys have doorknobs that are hard to grasp? So we think we try to say, like, anytime, even with the cabinets, if it's a smaller knob, as you develop kind of, even with me, like I have a bit of a sore thumb right now that I can't really bend really well. So then trying to grasp a knob is very difficult than having a larger lever. So those are kind of things that we start to talk about and think about. But we do that in a way where it feels residential, so you don't feel like you're living in a hospital like setting. Reach range is important. I think one of the things that we talk a lot about is microwave in the kitchen. Does anyone want to volunteer? Where's your favorite location for your microwave?
On
So
the
quiet.
cabinet.
On the cabinet? Yeah. So in a multifamily setting, you often see them like above the stove, right, where you have to reach up. And I think those are really tough because one, you have to, especially if you start to have a balancing issue, then you're trying to maneuver that one hand while, and so we try to make sure that they're a little bit lower, either on the counter or just below the counter. And so I think, Anne, we can actually do a survey just with the question on where's your favorite microwave location and list few options, because this is an ongoing debate is as to where's the best location. But I think these are kind of examples of, as we like where are the most comfortable locations, and we don't always all agree. So also having that variety is important. So we wanted to talk a little bit about like some of the kind of the general issues, but I know we're here to really talk about Life Plan Humboldt, and we, our design team first visited Humboldt last year, actually in December, early December in 2023. And you can see the picture of us sitting around the table, having conversations around some of the earlier issues, and got to really visit the lovely areas. It's like morning walk, morning dog walk by the beach was actually fantastic. And this is Emily, one of our members, and she's traveling from Pittsburgh. She's ready to move in, by the way. And I think she spent some few days already in the area on her vacation this summer. And so Life Plan Humboldt, I know many of you guys already know the details of it, but essentially what we're targeting at the moment is at 144 units total, where some of them are in apartments, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, and some of them are in cottages, as a single family or duplex type of cottages. We have set aside assisted living and memory care, and they're both 12 units each, and this fits right into that small house model. So we're creating this very residential care setting for the folks who are in either of these households, and they're flexible to switch from one to the other in case the needs are different. And every independent living apartments that and the cottages will be licensed to provide a level of care that would be typically provided at assisted living level. So when we start to talk about this 12 units of assisted living, this would be for folks that are a little bit in more needs, so higher acuity. And so we want to make sure that these environments are well, they're well designed so that they have good outdoor spaces, but also community spaces, and they're designed like essentially a large household. And then we have an amenity area that focuses around, again, dining and activities, and then creating them flexible, like creating them so that they're flexible in terms of their programs. One of the things that we're really looking forward to see is how the dining service or the dining program and the kitchen program is a little different. So one of the elements that we're designing with is this notion of having potlucks. And it's not something that we typically do in this kind of communities, but this is a group that really likes to spend time together and do things together. So how that's going to shape the actual details of these spaces will be very exciting to see. We're also working with an affordable housing developer to add a 50-unit affordable housing piece to be incorporated into the overall community. So in January, we got together with, I think we had almost 40 potential residents and volunteers, ambassadors joining us for a conversation. And this is where we really got down to talk about what is our vision for the program. And this is the result of the exercise that we did. And then the larger tabs are essentially meant like they came up more often. So you can see that some of these ideas around this notion of nature and outdoors is very repetitive for this community. Notion of sustainability is very high on the list, but creating a place of wellness that's engaging and it's viable. And then we start to talk about that a lot in terms of economics too, and a place that's inclusive and that builds a community as with all these supporting ideas around it was pretty solid in terms of how everyone talked about it along the similar lines. So this was really helpful for us to understand what the priorities were for the participants. And then that led into these notions. And then we also did some kind of a little bit higher level conversations about then what is your relationship to nature? What does that mean to age in place? And, how do you what does your first image want to look like in terms of the arrivals? So for instance, we gave these 2 examples. We do have a wetland on the site. So do we take advantage of that as a kind of the primary, or do we want to have, do our first impression want to be more of a welcoming building? And I think what we learned is that we want to see this as a primary, which is more a nature setting, than secondary as the building. So these are kind of ideas we were able to glean from the participants to see where the preferences are. And then the dining experience, and this was interesting. This is a result of the pie chart, and in terms of interest in dining with the community, a lot, you can see half the folks said, I really want to have maybe 1 to 4 meals a week with my peers. Whereas the other half said, no, I want to have 5 to 10, or at least that's almost 2 meals a day. Eating with the community, right? And then there's a very small group that says, I don't want any meal service. I want to cook for myself. So, this is how we kind of, so again, thinking about how do we then create a space and a program that speaks to each of these desires, means flexibility. So far, so good. Are you guys familiar with the site? It's at the corner of Central and Hillard in McKinleyville. And so this is kind of the overview of the site. And at the corner, as we get to the Hillard and Central, there's a gas station, and right off of it, there's a small, there's a kind of, this is an irregular shaped building, so we have a very small patch on that corner, then that leads to a larger portion. And then we got a existing wetland, and you can see kind of this long fingers in light blue that we're trying to reformulate. And then we came into the project with this smaller circle, or this wider circle that goes left to right, being the proposed wetland. And it looks really flat, but there's actually quite a bit of an elevation change. It goes from 10 feet from in the middle section and another 10 feet on the left. So it's not as flat as we thought. So kind of in the middle portion, we can actually have a full level change and still be able to negotiate that within the existing land. So that was interesting to understand. There's an existing residential neighborhood to the south and also two-story assisted living here. We got some buildings like Frito-Lay building. So it's a factory. So we're starting to talk about how do we address that particular edge as an amenity. And then of course, across the street, there's a development being talked about as the town center. So we're talking about how we make those connections and a street that runs through our site to connect across to Hillard to the existing town center proposals and the amenities. So talking about the site planning exercises, these are the lists that came up high on the list from the participants. So again, main entry to view the nature, and we want to minimize the north facing units, but at the same time, that north facing Hillard Road impression was very important from both the city's perspective, and also it's our first impression of the community, right? So how do we make that happen? And how do we mitigate impact of the northwest wind during the spring months? And then how do we best utilize the wetland, and what are the nature of these cottages and duplexes that we're talking about, were high on the list. So during the workshop, we divided the group into 5 different groups and then had them, we brought these building pieces, and these are the 5 different versions of the site layout the different groups did. And there were a lot of commonalities. And so we generated a diagram off of that, which basically said, okay, maybe the apartment is kind of the center. That's where we can build most density, but also have the most amenities. And then have use the cottages and affordable housing to circle around it, so that they're different distances, but keeping the amenities still somewhat centralized. And then we want to reorient the wetlands so we can take advantage of some of the land in this area. And that developed into a diagram like this. And the way we and you can see kind of the building pieces. These are kind of almost like Legos, not quite, but we had fun with playing with these pieces. So some of the elements of the community. So again, we talked about the Hiller Road being the front facing. So this is a yellow zone here. That's what we're calling the zone 1. We talked a lot about the materiality, and then the notion of having something that's organic. So wood tones, warmth, those were really important. And we also talked about if we're using wood as they ages, what does that mean? And are there different colors and different materials that we can supplement so that we can keep the community vibrant and warm throughout? Because, with some of the wood tones, I think as they silver, they do silver quite a bit and they lose color altogether, right? So we want to make sure that we don't lose all color. And this is also important to kind of talk about the independent living and the affordable housing. And the community has made a commitment that the affordable, really embracing the 2 programs as one internally. So even from the outside, there should be no differentiation between the 2 buildings. So that's something that we're looking to do. Now going into the zone 2 is this notion of arrival sequence. And what we're seeing this as envisioned, this notion of Wonderf, like where the cars and the pedestrian live together, but being a little bit more prioritizing the pedestrian activities but more so that there will be pavers, so then the cars take secondary priority to the pedestrians, kind of thinking about, this is a arrival point that links a lot of the amenities and the residences together. But again, how do we make this welcoming and that it provides that connection to everyone and it doesn't become a barrier? And that was important to us because we do have that street that we have to provide that bisects the site. Now, the third one, we want to talk about like the outdoor gathering opportunities that we can have around the wetlands. So this is our kind of prime opportunity to engage the outdoor activities and then this notion of indoor and outdoor spaces. So that's the zone 3. And then let's see, the zone 4 are the cottages. So now these are inspired by these smaller cottages in some of the early on houses that were historically found in the community. So they, and then this is Pat's guest house. So, this notions of having pitched house, like, kind of pitched roof forms, duplexes and triplexes, and then having having this notion of a front yard that are shared, and then, but also providing a loop around it so the vehicles have access, for deliveries and things like that, but still creating a community and that's more pedestrian oriented on one side. And then the cottages on the east, we started talking about, well, is there a difference between the west and the east? Can we make them distinct from each other so they have different amenities and so they're not all the same? So in this case, like they're potentially different. Maybe these are more grouped together and then we haven't really fully gone into it yet, but these notions of these portals and the more internal courts, maybe they're a little bit tighter in density and grouped together. So these are the notions that we're exploring is the we're still in the early design phases, but some of the ideas that we're exploring. And then the last piece of the south edge conditions. So this is towards the street and the Frito-Lay, the warehouse, and how do we treat those? And again, this is where we have to think about how do we co-live with vehicles? Um, do we have enough storage? And like, what do we do with all the kayaks that everyone owns when not everyone has their private garage spaces? So this is the area we're trying to grapple with that portion of the conversation. So this is the final proposed site plan at the end of concept. So we put this set together for pricing, and this was delivered at the end of March. So that's where we are in the conversation. So you can see that we have reoriented the wetlands, and then we have apartments in the middle that goes from 2 to 3 stories, taking advantage of the grade that we talked about. We have a large entry area and a welcoming area so the vehicles can turn around, but that connects the two sides, and this is the affordable housing. And you can see the triplex and duplex cottages on the right, and also triplex and duplex on the left. And the vehicle access, we pulled it around the edges, so the middle portion, all the spaces in between the buildings and the cottages are dedicated to pedestrians. So you can actually have a path and access to different amenities without having to negotiate vehicular traffic and crossing the street and things like that. So this is where the conversations are, and then we're working to talk a little bit more about the wetlands and what are, is this something that we're trying to get this area approved so we can reshape the wetland that's currently existing. And in terms of the projects, yeah.
Go back to that. I just want to point out there's
Mhm.
something really important we learned from people in the move-in survey. They're very want bike trails as well as walking trails. And so to the left of the proposed wetlands, there's a 50-foot easement for a bike trail that connects to the Midtown Trail in McKinleyville, which is going to connect, to Hiller Trail, and which ultimately is going to connect to the Great Redwood Trail going all the way to San Francisco. So I'm really excited about that, and it's going to be a great amenity for the community at large, because right now the Midtown Trail is incomplete.
Yeah, and then I think that's a great point, Anne. And then you can see these kind of brownish gray trails all around. So these are all the footpath that we're creating to connect different buildings and amenities and also different green spaces. So we're imagining that there's a series of green amenities in this area. And then so the darker greens are where we have programmed amenities, and then all the trails going around it.
I want to point out the off-leash park too.
Yeah. So to the right here, so this is where we're proposing the off-leash park. So it'll be fenced area. So if you have, your little ones, you want to let them at it and run around, that's where that amenity would be. And, imagining this as kind of the program green space that can have, this is potential area for things like barbecue pits, bocce courts, and things like that. And again, thinking about how do we be inclusive with the affordable housing and the rest of the community so that there's really no differentiation. So we try to associate different programs with different properties that are shared. So even with amenity spaces or gathering spaces, we're looking at what are different size of rooms that are available in different parts of the building so that we're not duplicating them, but rather creating synergy around them. I think this is also a good time to talk about, like, this is where the assisted living wing here and the memory care wings are. So there is a separate courtyard in between them that could be designed specifically for these areas. And then again, it's like what we're trying to avoid with these spaces is avoiding like kind of this double loaded corridor situation, but design it so that when you step out of your bedroom, you're really looking at living rooms and dining rooms, which would be kind of what you would expect to do in your home, right? You don't expect to go through a long corridor before you hit your living room. So I think that's how we're trying to design these areas. So some of the so project schedule, I think we had this actually put together for the participants because I think there's a little, not everyone is familiar with the design process and how we get to actual construction. So we just finished what we're calling the concept design. What that means is that we're sizing the program and the amenities, and we're also doing a cost review here. So this is where we are at the end of this. So we are doing the sustainability goal setting, and we're trying to see if we can buy everything that we want, how much does the project cost? And one, can we physically fit it on site? And two, can we afford it? So I think so we're kind of at that point where we are starting to evaluate those topics so that we can move forward with a project that's viable. And then after that, then we'll go through the schematic design and design development and construction document. This is where we put the documents together to get a building permit, And at the end of each phase, we'll take a pause to make sure that the project is still viable and there are no big changes that happens along the way. And then we'll literally hit the ground and get the construction going at the end of all that. So that's kind of an overview of where we are in the project elements. Are there any questions or anything that we can go into a little deeper?
What is the time frame for these phases?
Different phases. So again, like right now we're at this phase. So this probably will take us about like month and a half to 2 months to get to a point where we right size the project in terms of for the project. And then once we start moving on that, the schematic design will be about 3 months. And then the design development and construction documentation, they will each be about 4 months. And then the construction, I think we're probably going to be looking at least like about 2 years duration.
So we're talking about construction beginning potentially in
26, yeah.
Yeah, 2026. And being ready to roll, are you going to build the whole thing and then move people in? Or are you going to do it piece at a time and then move people in piece at a time?
So it's up in the air. We haven't really talked about it, but it's typically what ends up happening is that we'll probably, it's always an ongoing conversation. We can do the cottages first because they could be, they're pretty small buildings and they could be pretty nimble. But the problem is that the main building is the one that has all the infrastructure. So we can argue that that'll go in first. So we have all the amenities and kitchens in place, so we have all the dining services ready, and then we can get the cottages in later. So it can go either way.
Will the cottages be self-sufficient? In other words, if you
Meaning,
got a cottage, would it have everything you need to live in the kitchen?
Yep.
etc.?
So if you are able to cook for yourself, it would be self-sufficient. So each of these apartments have full kitchen. Just like so I think the way we start to think about these independent living apartments is that they're like just like your normal your regular apartments or cottages, but the difference is that we pay a little bit more attention to some of the details to make sure that they're a little bit easier for to live in kind of some of the aspects that we talked about earlier, like placement of appliances, reach ranges, getting rid of some of the thresholds. So for the most part, we anticipate that most of the bathrooms will have showers, rolling showers rather than a tub. So elements like that we think about, but otherwise they should be self-sufficient. And that's what really independent living is, right? They support you, but you are independent.
Can you consider walk-in tubs that are also showers?
You can. They're not the best. It's like they don't show well, but but I think those are kind of things that we can talk about. They're not popular because we because either you have to walk in and then you let the water like fill, and no one likes to sit there for the water to fill. And then, or if you're filling it beforehand, you still have to cross it over, right? So that still becomes a challenge. So we find that they're really not well utilized. So, but I think we're starting to talk about, do we have a hot tub somewhere on site, things like that. But we can, bathtubs are not really missed. Sometimes when there's a 2-bedroom apartments with 2 bathrooms, sometimes we see bathtubs on the second bathroom. So like if you have visitors or, if you want to do occasional bathing, then those are available. Now that level of detail, we haven't even decided yet, but they could, that could be something that we do.
What about the redesign of the wetland? Is that controversial? Is that going to have to get an EIR, et cetera?
It's not that controversial. Like, so our wetland, and then Anne can jump in if I'm not using the right terms, because she's been very involved with these. So these wetlands are not really considered like very high level like wetlands. So, and then so there's some strategies that we're employing. So when when we're displacing certain wetland, we actually have to increase the amount of space that we give back. So we're working with those within those terms. And so we think that it's actually, it's likely, like we don't see a lot of pushback, but Anne, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, no, our plans are, there's something called a mitigation ratio.
Mm-hmm.
We're planning for very generous mitigation ratios because and it'll be ultimately up to the authorities whether what's acceptable or
Mm-hmm.
not, but we're starting at the high end. And I think that what you find, and I got really excited about it because otherwise we're constricted. We have to have minimum of 16 units an acre, but the wetlands doesn't count for that. So it gives us open space
Mm-hmm.
and with a seasonal pond, with a trail around it, was going to be really pretty. And actually, when you see from the outdoor dining areas, you're going to be able to look out onto the wetlands. It's an attractive landscape feature. And I think that we're really trying to do it the right way and not trying to sneak around and invite controversy.
Yeah, and then the current existing wetland is like it's not, there's a better term for this, but it's not a high quality wetland, like, to use my words. And so what we're proposing is going to actually improve the existing conditions. And so what you're seeing here is that the darker blue at the outline is what we're proposing as the actual wetland, and it's going to have different vegetations that are appropriate to that. But then the lighter blue around it, that's the 50-foot buffer area that we're preserving. So within that area, we're not, there are a lot of things we can't do, but we can do things like the trails, we can plant it, we can put benches in it, things like that. So there's a whole trail around the wetlands that we're proposing. That's part of the program.
So are there any other questions? Some of the questions, there will be several stories with elevators in the apartments. Apparently they have ground level homes and can have outdoor patios.
Yes. So what we're proposing is that all the ground level patio, so all the cottages will have, have a porch and a patio on either side. All the ground level units will have a patio in front. like, so that these are these units. And then, it's a little questionable when you're in this unit, this close to the street, like, how much of a patio do you want? So I think those are kind of things that we're looking at, but we shape the form such that, as you get to the center, you get more buffer, and, you can have more of a patio in front. I think this notion of balconies is a bit something that we've been talking about. Like, do we need to provide a balcony for every unit? So I think where we're settling right now is that we'll provide options. So we'll have units with balconies and units without. So the trade-off will be, if you don't have a balcony, you might have a larger living room inside, like a living room instead. And so depending on locations, that's what we're looking at. And at the end of, and some of these, it's not all showing here, but some of the floors will actually have a more of a communal patio. And then we also have planned on the 3rd floor, a community outdoors patio off of a community room. So we're trying to provide that kind of different variety of sizes and different levels of outdoor spaces that we looked at earlier.
Are you going to have rooftop gardens and meeting spaces and such?
I think we're gonna have to look at that in terms of where we end up with the rooftop gardens. Like, we can do rooftop gardens, but because and then this is a zoning issue, and then this is really more, not a zoning issue, it's really more of a building code issue. We can have some program on the roof, but not an extensive one, just because we're trying to keep the construction costs down as a wood frame building. So we're gonna have some limitations in terms of what we can do at the rooftop.
Well,
Yes,
the
Anne?
other thing about rooftops is, we're actually having a meeting this afternoon for the initial planning of a solar microgrid for our community, and we'll need the rooftops for solar, and as well as probably some covered parking. So that's a very exciting development, but a lot, it's a lot between us and that, but that's one of our goals. And I just wanted to, Sue kind of skipped through it, but when she described how the apartments and cottages are going to be set up, the term for that is universal design. And the whole community, actually. It's so that if you are mobility challenged, you can get comfortably around. And that's something that a lot of us just don't have in our homes. All of us have friends who've, they've had a stroke, or they've had broken their hips, and they go back home and their bedroom's on the 2nd floor, and they're back, but this is that's one of the really exciting things about it, in addition to, the socialization and the potential for, growth and learning. The other exciting thing is you just can be comfortable and safe in a Life Plan Humboldt home.
So I'm going through the questions on the presentation, and there were kind of other questions that is kind of related to what Anne's talking about, universal design, and then it's what I called barrier-free earlier. And again, they come in all different aspects of it. So we start with the ground, making sure the levels are flat enough, and then you don't have big transitions, and that they're even. It's smooth, and so so it helps with the overall walking or walkability, or maneuverability. Make sure the spaces are large enough, so when we size our gathering spaces, we don't, our space factors account for folks with either walkers or wheelchairs, so we account for larger spaces. And then the other thing, like the lever handles. So the answer is yes, we do. We will provide lever handles on all doors, and even the windows. We talk about, like, the sliders are not very friendly. You have to, even mine, I hate at home, like I have to grasp it like this and try to yank it open. So what are the more friendlier form of operable windows? So casements tend to be one, but it's like those what do you call it? Those handles where you have to actually open and roll the casements are not great either. So I think those are always a kind of questions that's high on the list. How do we make sure the tracks are smooth? If you have a patio or balcony, the doors and that threshold out to the balconies or the patios, I think those are high on the list. We talked about the showers and those threshold conditions. And just maneuverability and locations of things, so that even refrigerators, I think we talk about, what's more friendly, freezer on top or freezer at the bottom, like what prevents you from having to bend over less, right? Like those are kind of questions that we're always asking. And what we're finding is that for the most part, there's a kind of a greater consensus, but never a full agreement. So I think what we're seeing in the marketplace is that the bottom freezers are more popular because we tend to use the refrigerators more. So having that at the standing level seems to be helpful. We talked about microwave locations. That's always controversial.
Sue, I just wanted to say a
Mhm.
little bit about the landscaping and that you helped us, and we actually had
Mhm.
3 board members and I think 4 or 5 community members who are noted, gardeners and outdoor people, including Carol Ralph of the Humboldt Native Plant Society, interview, a series of landscape architects, and we decided to hire Philip Stevens with Land Concern,
Mhm.
and there's no licensed landscape architects in Humboldt County. So what we did, he's from Southern Humboldt, excuse me, Southern California, but he really listened to us again, and prior to the interview, he visited the native plant garden section of the Humboldt Botanical Garden and called some of the native plant nurseries and really familiarized himself with the options here. And he's really excited at making something that's welcoming and that's utilizing the beautiful native plants we have here. And I love some of his ideas about having a gazebo, for example, one where you could have like a sign there of like, okay, this is a place to be quiet, a kind of a meditation space. And we'll have other places where where it's really expected you can go there and be social. Or you can have benches like that. If I this bench, I don't want to talk. But I can't wait till we can get this next level plot plan and put some of the landscaping in it. And he'll have 3-dimensional views. And he said you can even look what it's going to look like from the apartments and cottages, look out the window and see what it's going to look like. So it's very, very exciting.
Yeah.
I think the idea of a hot tub is actually really good. I think it would be good for many people as they get older. And I don't know whether you're planning to have a fitness area, a gym of some sort as part of this.
Yeah.
Also would be a very good idea.
So to kind of elaborate on the fitness and wellness program, I think what we're talking about here is that where this community is going to be very different than the rest, to go back in history a little bit in terms of what's being built out there for the last couple of decades, is a very high hospitality model that caters to like really the elite wealthy. And then here, I think what we want to create is something that feels more like home, that feels more comfortable, something that we grew up with. And that also means that we want to talk about what amenities we bring in and where do we create that community interaction with all the amenities that's already out there. So Anne and the team, and I see Joanne in the middle of my screen too, has been working really hard with the community to find opportunities for partnership. So if we have a pool 2 blocks away, then we don't want to build another pool, for example. But in the meantime, we do want to make sure that there is some adequate, that there is actually a good opportunities within the community, like within the Life Plan Humboldt community for these activities. So we're going to be maximizing our opportunities with the outdoor trails. So the walking trails, and we're also talking about park horses around the trails that can actually act as equipments and things like that. And then we do have a wellness like room or an exercise room available so that you can actually do like small gatherings, chair exercises and things like that. So so we're evaluating what should be on site versus what could be off site. And again, like thinking about where can we maximize our partnership with the amenities that's already in the community. Yep.
Joanne just commented the development north of Hiller will also have trails and
Wetlands.
wetlands, yeah.
Yeah, actually, there, across Hiller, there's about 45 acres and that, or 43 acres that is
Mhm.
part of the McKinleyville Town Center. And there's at least 15 acres of wetlands there. So they're gonna have nature areas and trails and whatever. I can't wait for that to get built because we're gonna have a nice senior-friendly crossing of Hiller Way and a place to, really have more extensive walking than we can have on our 14.5 acre property.
Yeah.
I think if we're going to age in place, it's really important to make sure people can run around places in their wheelchairs,
Yes.
not just walkers, but wheelchairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, we did have somebody in a wheelchair and participate in our design charrette, and we
Yeah.
reminded us, not that we don't think about
Mhm.
that, but reminded us all the time. And that's why Sue did point out about the surfaces on the trails need to be really not only for wheelchairs, they're a little more forgiving, but walkers
Yeah.
they need a solid surface for walking.
Well, the other thing is, if you've got elevation changes like this, there are such things as moving walkways that you could potentially create a place where you could change elevations with a moving walkway
Yeah.
going up and downhill.
What's
Or-
great, Jane, about our site is that it's a gentle slope. So you really don't notice it, but it helped us to kind of think about, I think as we're starting to think about how's the buildings situated with, kind of taking advantage of the existing grade. So there's enough of change from one side to the other, but it's going to be gentle enough where we don't, there's not a lot of like big elevation changes, but we do have elevators within the building to that. So you're going to come in at the second level and then this is actually at the lower level. So we do have elevators that'll help negotiate that also. But if you're walking on the perimeter, it's a relatively gentle slope from one side to the other.
Are you going to build a physical model of this so we can actually look at seeing what it would look like in reality?
I think Joanne's already at it, right? And the answer is yes. We're gonna actually, so we're gonna build physical models, but also renderings and things like that, so you can get a lot more in-depth understanding of it. There wasn't enough developed that we wanted to share at this point, but next time we get together, we're very hopeful that we can share a lot more.
Great. Sounds good to me. Any other questions or concerns or issues? Yes, no? All right, you can learn about the model of lifeplanhumboldt.org. Residents pay an entry fee but do not own anything, right? Their monthly fees. Okay, I want to thank you both for a great presentation. This is very interesting, and let you all know that, of course, this will be online at the OLLI website if you want to come back to it later, probably in about a week, if not earlier. And that next week, on Monday, July 15th, we'll be having a talk by Stephen St. Thomas on climate gardening. He'll lead a discussion on how to adapt to and mitigate climate change through low-impact techniques to yield more food from gardens, as well as rainwater catchment and composting systems. And maybe you might all want to check in on this anyway to see how that would affect Life Plan Humboldt. Thank you ever so much, everybody.
Thank you.
If you haven't joined up, please do. We need you. We'll look forward to seeing you again.
Jane, I don't know if I paid my membership or not. Is there a way of checking?
Well, yeah, call.
Okay.
Call and find out. Did you get an invitation?
Yeah. I
You
did.
probably did then, because only people who are members get a
Okay.
invitation. Except your exception because you're a speaker. So I don't know. Got me. Call.
Bye-bye.
Look in your checkbook or whatever you stuck it on. Or become a sustaining member. And if you become a sustaining member, then you're automatically renewed and you pay a certain amount per month toward that. So that's how it's supposed to work. So Look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you ever so much. Any other questions? Yes? No? Have a great day. We have our fog back and our cooler weather. I'm very grateful. Take care now.